the beating heart of the gambling hall. Now bloodless and still.
And welcome back to more Darkest Dungeon. This is episode 34, week 86, getting underway. And we're starting off with kind of an odd town event. We've never seen this one before. It's just one of those random ones that can occur along the way. Daylight robbery. Operations will be suspended temporarily, but given the limited avenues of egress from the hamlet, officials are optimistic the thieves will be apprehended shortly. The gambling hall is locked, and the bar and brothel costs are reduced by 50%. Yeah, so I don't really know what to make of this town event. It seems kind of odd that one of the facilities in the tavern would be closed and the others would have a reduced cost, but as you know, I almost never use stress reduction facilities, and if I do, I tend to go for the Abbey. So yeah, this one doesn't really affect us, but kind of fun to see a different one pop up, out of nowhere. Alright, so to the task at hand, Devatron, a Bewitching Predator. Kill one Countess. So this is the final quest in the Courtyard area for the Crimson Court DLC. If you recall, the initial quest was called Burn the Hives, where we just kind of explored the Courtyard zone a little bit. And then the next one was the Baron. After that, just last episode, we defeated the Viscount. And now finally we will confront the Countess. Now incidentally, once the player has completed this quest, they can still access the Courtyard area and do this repeatable kind of mini boss encounter called the Garden Guardian. Now the only reason the devs put this in there is so that you can continue to go back into the Courtyard and farm the various Crimson Court trinkets. In case there was one that you just really wanted and you hadn't got to drop for you yet, etc. Now in this playthrough I did go back in there and do the Garden Guardian a few times, but it's a really boring encounter and it doesn't add anything to the story, so I didn't choose to include it in the video series. Okay, as we get our party together here, you're going to see something that I don't think you've seen me do thus far. I'm going to go into the Nomad Wagon and then switch over to the Shard Vendor and buy one of the Color of Madness trinkets for our Man-at-Arms. So the trinket is called the Mirror Shield. You'll see it here. It gives a bonus to dodge, stun resistance, and most important, it reflects 30% of incoming damage back to the Man-at-Arms attacker. So I really like this trinket. It catches a lot of flack. Some people consider its stats contradictory. For example, it buffs your dodge, but if you dodge, then you're not taking damage, and then you're not reflecting any damage back. But I don't really buy that argument. I mean, if you dodge an attack, that's best case scenario. You don't take any damage. If he's guarding somebody, then he doesn't take any damage from the attack that would have gone to somebody else and probably hit and done damage, right? So I don't mind that at all. And then if he does get hit, then he's going to reflect some of it back. So I think it is a beautiful combination of stats, in fact, that synergize quite well. Now, truth be told, the reflected damage doesn't really add up to be much. It's not a game changer or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, just the other stats by themselves, plus 20% stun resistance and plus 10 dodge, those are great. I mean, I would wear the trinket just with those stats, So the reflected damage is just icing on the cake, and I really think it's one of the best trinkets for the Man-at-Arms in the game. Alright, so as for this quest, I've got kind of a weird composition here, admittedly, right? We have a Hellion, a Man-at-Arms, and then our typical Jester and Vestal. So as for the Man-at-Arms, that's pretty solid. You've seen us use the Man-at-Arms in a Courtyard quest before. I believe the first two, but most important when we did the Baron, which was one of these long, epic marathon dungeons. Man-at-Arms is just great in these Courtyard maps. He helps you survive, he can guard, he can buff the party with dodge in a fight, his camping skills are great, etc. So he's, a really solid choice. Now the Hellion, in contrast, is a little bit of a head-scratcher, especially when you have things like a shield breaker, or a highwayman available, or even a flagellant, as you saw in last episode when we did the Viscount. But if you look closer, you can see that she's going to do really well in here. So first of all, the Hellion can hit any of the 4 enemy ranks. So that's a big plus. And second, and most important, she has excellent bleed attacks. She can bleed on the 1st or 2nd or 3rd enemy ranks. And as you saw last time with the Flagellant, and as you've seen all along with the Jester, bleed attacks just work wonders in these Courtyard maps. Okay, so we're just about ready to go here, and as promised, before entering the dungeon, I will present the entirety of the Crimson Court backstory in chronological order. Here we go.
The courtyard and gardens surrounding the manor were once a point of pride for the diligent custodians I employed. Great banquets and lavish social affairs were hosted here under the stars. Despite the expectation of propriety normally ascribed to those in our position, we mocked the stoic melancholy of the moss-covered fountains and cherubic statues, our salacious trysts half hidden in the hedgerows, our morality slipping ever deeper into the mud. In those younger years, my home was a hive of unbridled hedonism, a roiling apiary where instinct and impulse were indulged with wild abandon. A bewitching predator slipped in amidst the swarm of tittering sycophants. Though outwardly urbane, I could sense in her a mocking thirst. Driven half-mad by cloying vulgarity, I plotted to rid myself of this lurking threat in a grand display of sadistic sport. But as the moment of murder drew nigh, the gibbous moon revealed her inhuman desires in all their stultifying hideousness. They would arrive in teeming hordes, adorned in powdered wigs and pretension, seeking to slake their thirst on wine and indecency. As intoxication invariably took hold, innocuous frivolities would escalate to ever more disturbing diversions. Orchestrating the hideous affair was a hunchbacked fiend who seemed to delight in proportion to the suffering he caused. I could have stopped him, I suppose, but I was a slave to my own appetites, and restraint would have rendered me a hypocrite. The feasting and revelry would last for weeks at a time. Great stone tables were set with such an abundance of rare delicacies that we would stuff ourselves until the exotic became mundane. When the lavish spread began to spoil, a ravenous gourmand gleefully proposed that we sample from the fetid pile of composting refuse. The notion was dismissed as decidedly unhealthy. But days later, he was found cackling madly atop a heap of rancid comestibles, licking his fingers in delight. Mercifully, the morbid encounter resolved itself in my favor, and I set to work pursuing degeneracy in its most decadent forms. The air pulsed with anticipation as I revealed the unnatural terroir of the house vintage. But my exultation was cut short as the attending gentry turned upon themselves in an orgy of indescribable frenzy. A single drop of that forbidden tannin gifted me with a dizzying glimpse of the hibernating horror beneath my feet, and in that moment, I understood the terrible truth of the world. I stood reborn, molded by newfound knowledge, my head throbbing to the growing wine of winged vermin come to drink the tainted blood of the darkest dungeon. Even my untethered imagination dares not conceive of what effect the years spent submerged in toxic sludge may have had on her heteromorphic flesh.
Whoa, wow, Devatron. Talk about big time. I mean, this is kind of like backstory to the backstory. So not only does this explain how this courtyard area came to be inhabited by all these aristocratic, courtly, bloodsucker type enemies, but it also suggests that this is how it all started. This is how our ancestor initially fell into his morbid obsession with otherworldly powers and his, dark pursuits of the evil that lie beneath our estate.
If only treasure could staunch the flow of otherworldly corruption.
So yeah, what I consider to be just an excellent backstory. It's well written, well voiced over. The animated bits are just, stylistic and really beautiful. And I think it gives a lot of depth to what is already a very, macabre and compelling backstory.
Ambushed by foul invention. Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all. Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles.
Alright, so we're getting underway here. Our first little fight is the result of a failed trap disarming. I mean, come on. We don't we don't need to start like this, Dev. Before that, we went to that last room and got some firewood. We're going to go ahead and use it right away.
Circle in the dark. The battle may yet be won.
So yeah, this may come as something of a surprise, especially considering how much trouble we had with our food in the last episode. But, rest assured, Devatron, the bee burner wasn't going to make the same miscalculation twice. I think I started this dungeon with like 46 food or something. Yeah, I double-checked everything and made sure we were going to be able to get through the entire dungeon, have enough food, and camp as much as we wanted. And if I recall correctly, I think I planned it so that the party is going to have camping buffs for every fight, or almost every fight, throughout the whole dungeon. I mean, hallways, rooms, the boss, everything. And this is just great because it's really going to help speed up the fights and ultimately speed up the entire dungeon.
To perform beyond one's limits. formation is broken. Maintain the offensive. Precision and power. As the fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms. Impressive. Annihilated. Press this advantage. Give them no quarter. Foolish horrors. Brought low and driven into the mud.
All right, so some really nice stuff there. You can immediately see the benefit of the camping buffs. This type of party is going to be, very steady, very survivable. They're not going to take too much damage or get in too much trouble, but at the same time, they're not going to just blast through the enemies. They're going to have to steadily move along and take out one at a time.
Decisive pummeling. The slow death. Unforeseen, unforgiving. Grievous injury, palpable fear. The ground quakes. A devastating blow. A trifling victory, but a victory nonetheless.
Okay, and right off the bat, we get a Crimson Court trinket to drop, off just a trash pool in the hallway here. This one's for the Jester, and while it's not necessarily a great trinket, and that set isn't really good, nonetheless, this is already a huge improvement loot-wise over last episode's run. If you recall, we didn't get any Crimson Court trinkets to drop anywhere, even using keys on special chests and everything. The only one we got that entire run was the one that the boss dropped. Alright, so here's a wine crate. We're going to be able to get some more firewood. However, to make room for it in the inventory, I actually have to eat some food and just heal up that way. Because we have too much food in our inventory. Like I said, I definitely wasn't going to make the same mistake twice.
Packs laden with loot are often low on supplies. Mechanical hazards possessed by evil intent. Sedated. Is the weapon that cuts on its own. Obliterated. Seize this momentum. Push on to the task's end.
And here, another wine crate. Unfortunately, we don't have enough room in inventory to pick up some firewood. You can see there's a lot of it around.
Masterfully executed. Slowly, gently. This is how a life is taken. These nightmarish creatures can be felled. They can be beaten. momentary abatement. As victories mount, so too will resistance.
Alright, another couple fights down, no problems for this party. Again, a very slow and steady kind of pace, but very survivable. They're dodging a lot of the enemy attacks, which is great. And this is primarily due to the man-at-arms and his camping skill, which increases the party's dodge, but also he has an ability he uses in combat, which further increases the entire party's dodge. Again, it takes a round for him to set that up, and that's a round he's not doing any damage, but ultimately it lends itself to this slow, steady, survivable pace.
The will to fight falters. The blood pumps, the limbs obey. Eradicated. This expedition at least promises success.
Alright, look here, we have a jute tapestry in this treasure. That's worth 4,500 gold, Dev. The highest selling trash item in the game, and I have no room for it, and I have to just, leave it on the ground. As for the fight, A great fight. Unfortunately, our Vestal contracted the Crimson Curse, but I mean, you're going to have that in these long, epic dungeons when you're going through in one take. Some, if not all, of your heroes are going to get the curse.
Gathered close in tenuous firelight and uneasy companionship.
So notice here I take the 4 food option, and then also notice here in Respite we have 14 points, not the usual 12. So I'll take these in order. As for the 4 food option, which I believe I selected the first time we camped as well, look at the party. We don't have that much stress damage, so we didn't need to use the 8 food option to get the big stress heal right. So this is another way, in addition to just bringing more food, that I was hoping to remedy the mistakes of last episode and not run out of food. Now, as for having 14 respite points instead of the usual 12, we have a Hellion in our party, and she's considered one of the 3 outsider classes. And I don't think you saw us build it, but in the districts interface, we had built the Outsiders Bonfire building. And what that upgrade does is allow you to have 2 extra respite points when you camp, whenever you have a Hellion, an Abomination, or a Leper in your party. So in addition to the reasons I mentioned when we were provisioning as to why Hellion is a pretty decent choice in here, this is, another great reason. It doesn't sound like a lot, but having that extra 2 points does really help. And speaking of camping, we have backtracked in order to get that wine crate we passed earlier, so that we could get some more firewood. And then here we're using some medicinal herbs to pick up some more food and replenish that supply. So this was a planned backtracking. So we've already camped twice, and I've been talking about other things and haven't mentioned the buffs that we're using. The Man-at-Arms has 2 amazing group buffs. One buffs the entire party with dodge and critical chance, and then the other buffs his 3 companions with a bonus to damage, which is just amazing. And then essentially another bonus to critical chance. There's a 75% chance that that critical bonus will stick, but it usually does. So those 2 are great right there, and that takes up 8 of your points. 4 more need to be spent preventing a nighttime ambush, which in this case I do with the Vestal. But because of the Hellion and the Outsiders Bonfire, we have that extra 2 points, and with that I'm able to use a Jester buff and reduce the incoming stress on one of our party members.
Glittering gold, trinkets and baubles, paid for in blood.
Okay, coming up here, you're going to see something you've never seen me do before. I'm going to interact with this curio called a Throbbing Cocoon and use a torch. And what that does is it provides a pretty good stress heal. This wasn't totally necessary or anything like that, but it was there. We had a spare torch. The Vestal had 14 stress she was carrying around, so yeah, why not?
compassion is a rarity in the fevered pitch of battle. Powerful blow. Success so clearly in view. Or is it merely a trick of the light?
Alright, a nasty party shuffle at the start of that fight made it much more difficult than it should have been, and unfortunately our poor man-at-arms contracted the Crimson Curse. But all in all, pretty good considering the shuffle. And then our first colored key, we got the yellow key. Obviously this will unlock the yellow gate, and that should be coming up before long.
Struck. Singular strike. Their cursed champion falls. Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer.
Dive Bugling, Devatron, with the killing blow. Yeah, the man-at-arms with 2 names. Just love that guy.
Sedated. Be wary. Triumphant pride precipitates a dizzying fall.
Of dodges and death blows, the tale of Dive Bugling. Yeah, I mean, did you see all those dodges? Like, wow. I mean, that's a man-at-arms party for you, Devatron. Love it.
approaches. Decimated.
Okay, so there was the yellow gate. We used the yellow key on it, and that freed up an inventory spot. And as you could see at this point, the group was just coasting along, just really effortless and stress-free. Being able to camp as much as we did and always having buffs on really made the run pretty smooth.
Mortality clarified in a single strike. Sedated.
consumes the mind.
A fortune, waiting to be spent.
Okay, so not too bad. I don't know if you can tell, but that fight and the one prior were done without camping buffs. In other words, camping buffs only last for 4 battles. So our buffs since last camping had worn off before we did the last 2 fights. And I don't know if you could tell, but they weren't as smooth. Again, you can see the party doesn't really need them, but they just help. You know, they help speed things up, and they keep everybody alive a little bit longer. And again, I may have exaggerated in the beginning. The plan wasn't to have camping buffs for every fight, but for almost every fight. And I definitely had mapped out when and where to camp, and I knew that some of the fights, like the last 2 and this one coming up, would be done without them.
Confusion, nerves, and panic. The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden. The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden.
Nice riposte kill. Dive bugling again, Devatron. Yeah, that was a pretty rough fight. A lot of it had to do with the fact that it was the dreaded 4-manservant pull. That pull is just always going to be rough. Second, we got shuffled. This composition is particularly vulnerable to a shuffle. They just don't do well unless they're in their, set spots. And then, of course, like I just mentioned, we didn't have any camping buffs, so all of that added up to a pretty rough fight.
The flesh is knit.
A 26 damage crit out of a man-at-arms? Dive bugling again, Devatron. Wow. Yeah, I think he did so much damage there because he's in the bloodlust state of his Crimson Curse. He was craving, and then I gave him some blood, so that's going to increase some damage. But yeah, he really had a red letter run here. This was quite the showcase for our lovely man-at-arms.
A moment of respite. A chance to steel oneself against the coming horrors.
Okay, so another camping session. This time I went with the full 8 food option. You can see we still have 24 food left, so more than enough. And if I recall correctly, I'm only going to camp maybe only one more time. Maybe it's twice, I can't remember, but we have more food than we need at this point, so why not go for the full 8, get a nice heal and stress heal, and then move on.
to a killing blow. A momentary abatement. Inspiration and improvement.
Alright, so you can immediately notice the effect of having the camping buffs, more crits, more dodges, everybody just does better. The only thing that went wrong in that fight, and it was just a minor detail, it wasn't a party shuffle technically, rather Dive Buglin in the throes of his bloodlusted Crimson Curse state decided to step into rank 1. And that's just something you can't control. When characters are bloodlusted, they'll do things like that. They'll interact with curios, they'll change their party spot. It's just a random effect.
The blood quickens. Perhaps the turning point.
Okay, really nice fight there. The large flesh eater did have a really hard-hitting tentacle devour move on poor Dive Buglin. It hit him so hard because he had marked himself using Retribution. That's his riposte move. But fortunately, our trusty Vestal bounced him right back with a critical heal and got him all the way to full. So that was some pretty exciting stuff.
A brilliant confluence of skill and purpose. A dizzying blow to body and brain. Soothed, sedated.
Okay, so some more solid stuff. And as you can see, nothing was really giving this party any pause. We were just gliding through the dungeon, and I was really pleasantly surprised with how well the group was doing and with how well the dungeon was treating me. Not too much rough RNG. And, you know, this was in contrast to our Baron run, which was at points extremely stressful. I mean, I actually thought we were going to wipe at a couple times in that run. And also in contrast to last run, doing the Viscount, that run was for the most part smooth, but you remember, you know, it was kind of stressful with the miscalculation on the food, and I had to gamble a little bit and shuck and jive on the fly, you know what I mean? So in contrast, this run was very agreeable, very fun to play, and yeah, I was just really pleased with how it went and how well the party performed. Okay, so that was the 4th battle since we last rested. So I don't know if you can tell, but our buffs have worn off. So I should be resting here soon. However, we have to go down this hallway just a touch, actually, not the full way, because here we have the red key, which is the last key we'll need. So we're just going to grab it and then backpedal in to the last room and then make our way up toward the boss. Now, I do make one small miscalculation. Right here, Dive Buglin starts craving, you see that? But instead of giving him some blood and slaking his thirst, I was like, I'll just push on, do it right before the boss so he'll be bloodlusted for the boss fight, and, that'll help us in that fight. Unfortunately, though, he decides that he'll just take matters into his own hands and interact with this curio up here in search of some blood.
momentary abatement. passion is a rarity in the fevered pitch of battle.
So you could see it made for a pretty rough fight. Not only did we have an extra fight, but we got surprised, because if you don't interact with those curios with just the right provision item, things like that are going to happen. So being surprised got us shuffled, made the fight longer and harder, etc. And you think I'd learned my lesson, right? But no, I have 2 craving party members, and I'm just pressing on.
Sedated. Diminished.
Alright, so not too bad there. We have a special chest here, and alas, we get another Crimson Court trinket. Again, it's not a great one. It's not part of a very good set or anything, but just nice to see that in this run, in contrast to last run, we were getting, a little bit better loot rolls.
wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden.
Alright, kind of a weird fight. In the middle of it, Dive Buglin quit craving, and his curse went into passive mode, and I have no idea why. I didn't feed him any blood or anything. That's just what happened. At any rate, we passed through the red gate using the red key, and the way is pretty much clear at this point to the boss. I'm going to obviously rest one more time before that. And we do have the matter of a craving Vestal. So I can't remember if I just give everybody some blood right before the boss or whatnot. But at this point, I go ahead and decide to camp.
A spark without kindling is a goal without hope.
Okay, as for this boss encounter, I don't want to give too much away, but there is kind of a major mechanic to the fight that you need to be aware of. And that is the Countess will place these little parasite egg globules on the heroes. And if a hero gets one on him or her, it'll do a little bit of damage over time, but not too bad. However, if the hero attacks the Countess, then the parasite egg will explode and do massive damage, alright? The thing is, though, you can do any other type of action with a parasite egg on you, and it won't explode. So you can cast heal spells, you can move your position around the party, you can cast buffs, or, most important in our case, if you're Dive Buglin, you can guard another party member without having the parasite egg explode. So now, as you can probably guess, that's going to be our strategy. We're going to pick one character to be the damage dealer. That's going to be the Hellion. She's just going to attack and do as much damage the entire time. Dive Buglin's going to set up a guard on her immediately and maintain it throughout the whole fight. And then the Jester will buff and the Vestal will heal.
Curious is the trap maker's art, his efficacy unwitnessed by his own eyes.
Now, of course, the Countess is going to be doing all kinds of other attacks the whole time and going into different phases and whatnot. But I'll just let you sit back and watch how that all plays out. I think you're going to enjoy it. For now, we're here. Let's top off, get ready. It's been another long, grueling, epic Crimson Court dungeon, and I appreciate you sticking it out with me. Let's go put an end to this Crimson Curse. Defeat the Countess. Here we go, Devatron.
The Countess arrives, anomalous in aspect, and bent on exacting terrible revenge from beyond the bounds of decency. wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden. Sedated. Sedated. Where I failed, You have succeeded. And the world is better for it.
Ooh, yeah. Marathon boss fight, Devatron. Big time. Alright, a couple of trinkets and a blueprint. Not a bad drop off of the Countess herself. Let's see what's in this chest. Continue adventuring. Come on, we got a chest here, Devatron.
Finding the stuff is only the first test. Now it must be carried home.
Alright, a green key. Let's go find some more treasure with it. Ha ha ha. Wouldn't do that to you again, Devatron. How bad was that on the Baron run? All that extra time for no special loot. Alright, let's tally up these rewards. 0 heirlooms, Devatron. 0. We got the blueprint. Not much gold picked up, but a decent gold reward from the quest. A trophy, another trinket, whatever. Fingophobia, that's not good. More stress with a lot of light. Neither of those are of any import on Dive Bugler. Steady, replacing robust, that's good. Especially on a Vestal. Darkest Dungeon, Crimson Court, Devatron. Wow. What a DLC. Great backstory. The Countess is down. The curse is done. Let's see what happened back at the hamlet.
The rusted, moss-covered gates of the courtyard hang open, but the demoniacal pests will spread no further than its blood-soaked boundaries. And so, at last, the end of my beginning.
Oh yeah, big time. Great story, great ending to the DLC. Hope you enjoyed it. We will see you in the next episode.